Right, so welcome everybody. This is our fourth our seminar on our new series on teaching programming with or without AI, but actually everything has been with AI. I'm Jane Waite and I'm chairing the session today. And in this series, we're focusing on new approaches to teaching programming at school. And we're here to explore research that can help us support learners in their teaching. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our speaker. That's Dr. B Becker, who's joining us from University College Dublin. I've known Brett for quite a while and I very much enjoy hearing about his research, and he's a great presenter. He's at UCD School of Computer Science, and his research focus on a wide range of topics, including psychology of programming, programming error messages, novice programmer behavior, metacognition, and of course the good old Gen AI in education, which is on everyone's minds right now. In 2020, he received Ireland's prestigious National Forum Teaching and Learning Research Fellowships for his contributions to higher education, and well deserved. So in his talk, Brett's going to address this really unique landscape we have right now of programming education across the phases, particularly looking at challenges and opportunities that are already with us in terms of generative AI. And I think what's important is that we're all here to prepare our students for further educational careers, regardless of what their path is. And so I'm really excited to hear Brett's views about all of this. And so over to you, Brett.
Great. So thanks very much for having me. And thank you for a great introduction, Jane. I don't really have to say who I am or what I'm here to talk about. So this front slide here is largely unnecessary unless you need my contact details. I'm going to advance my slide and tell you a little bit about me for context. I did my schooling and my undergrad degrees in the United States, and then I did all of my postgraduate work in Ireland, where I've been for the past 25 years. But I teach every year in China for the past, I don't know, 8 or so years. So I move around a good bit. In terms of research, I have 6 PhD students currently, all in computing education. 4, interestingly, are educators themselves, ranging from primary to university. And I have 1 who's focusing on pre-university AI in education. So quite related to what we're talking about here today. A few recent projects that are kind of contextualized in what we're talking about here. I won't mention the first one because Jane already did. The second one is Computing Crossroads, which is where I highlight career diversity in computing. We interview people who either don't have academic computing backgrounds but work in computing, or who have academic computing backgrounds but don't work in computing. And it's really interesting because we're talking about these transitions today, so you might be interested in that. And I also just finished up a 3-year term on the steering committee of the ACM CS 2023 curriculum, where I chaired the society, ethics, and the profession knowledge area, which also obviously had a bit to do with generative AI. So what are we talking about here today? AI, programming, education, and the key to me here today is moving from school to wherever life takes one after school. But what is coming down the tracks at full speed? These are 2 snippets that I got from the news in the past week here. Do developers still need to learn programming languages in the age of AI? So is talking about learning to program with AI going to be a moot point in a few years? I don't know. And the one on the right, I have yet to read the paper, but you might be really interested in that. You'll see things like lifelong learning, transfer learning, but people are starting to talk about things like federated learning, where there's going to be this collective AI-based intelligence where possibly everything that I know, you know, and everything that you know, I know. So it's a really interesting looking paper couched in educational terminology that most of us would be familiar with. So that's what's coming down the tracks at us as we talk about what we're talking about today. So a few words of warning first. Whatever we discuss here today might be totally obsolete soon. Don't be expecting too much technical wisdom. Do be expecting a lot of complicated questions from me. A lot of this is my own opinion and conjecture, so don't hang me out to dry if I turn out to be wrong. And my goal is here to stimulate thinking about how Gen AI and programming can affect all school students and how we can use it best to help them wherever they go after school. An approximate overview of today, we're going to do some definitions next, and then we're going to do what we need to know, what we know today, and then what do we need to know going ahead, broken down into primary and secondary. And then a fun little example on how not to do it. And then a couple biased examples on tools and resources on how I think we should do this. And then we'll end up with talking a little bit beyond programming. So definitions are always dangerous to put in slides, especially when they're recorded. But I know that we have a pretty generalist audience here today. So today, when we say AI, we mean an attempt to model aspects of human thought on computers. And when we say generative AI, we're talking about an application of specific types of AI, which feature models that are trained to generate content typical of that which a human can, such as a poem or music or images, or, importantly, computer programs. And I'm going to be a little lazy in my educational terminology, but just so we're all on kind of the same page, when I say first or primary level, I mean up to about 10 years of age. When I say second level, I'm talking about 11 to 17 pre-adult years of age. So think about US high school age. And then when I say third level, I mean non-compulsory further education, university education, et cetera, et cetera. And when I say the real world, I mean what happens after compulsory schooling. So I include third level university education as part of the real world. Because we're talking about that transition today, I think that's important. University students are generally adults. They're there by choice. They have serious responsibilities. And like I said, because I want to talk about that transition, I'm considering today university students to be in the real world. So what do we know today about Gen AI and programming? We know that generative AI can program well, but we know that it's not all about programming. Gen AI is really, really permeating everything really quickly, and we can't lose sight of that. And in fact, by the end of this talk, we won't even be talking about programming. I feel that's almost unavoidable when talking about programming and Gen AI to end up talking more generalistically. So here we go with what we know. Back in the summer of 2021, a few colleagues and I ran an experiment with a GPT-3 variant, which is now kind of ancient technology, to try to assess how well these tools can program. So what we did was we took historical data from the University of Auckland. We had the exams, we had the student data, and fortunately, these exams were all auto-graded. So we could literally use a Codex or GPT-3 as a student. We had the exam, we had the system, we had the student marks to do the comparison. So all we did was copy exam questions into Codex and hit go. And the auto-grader graded Codex just like it graded all the other students. And we compared Codex to the students. So we had two real tests. These are the tests that the real students took. And the scale here on the left, you can see that it got 100% on some questions. It completely bombed on a few questions. But overall, that's not too bad. When we compared it to students, Codex is the red star here on the right graph. So that's in the upper quartile of real university students in introductory programming. And this was 3 years ago. Just a few months ago, we decided to redo this experiment as a larger paper. In fact, this is a 52-page paper that's a lit review. It includes student and instructor interviews and surveys, and a pretty thorough treatment of ethical considerations on Gen AI and programming as well. I'll also come back to this later, but in this paper, when we reran that experiment, on the right, you can see what happened when we applied GPT-4 to the same exams. It basically aces everything. So it's safe to say right now that at any university, GPT-4 is just about as good or better than the best programming student in first-year programming. We summarized all of this in a recent Communications of the ACM article 2 months ago. And on the right here, you can see the blue X is GPT-3 in 2021, and the red X, which is almost the best student in the class, if you will, in 2024. So that's how much progress has been made in 3 years, which is pretty phenomenal. So that's what we know. In a nutshell, Gen AI is good at programming. If we bring this down to the school level, just for fun, we ran the UK A-level CS exam and the Irish equivalent leaving certificate exam in computer science at GPT-4, and it completely aced everything, essentially. There were a few types of problems where it stumbled on, normally ones that involved diagrams. We didn't get into using vision models. So at high school, second level, GPT-4 is probably better than the best programmers. But what are we really dealing with here? Let's back up. I'm even sitting back in my seat. What are we really talking about? We can't forget the big picture here. And the big picture is that there are tons of opportunities in Gen AI that go beyond programming. Gen AI can be used to generate original content. It can be used to build life-changing accessibility tools. It can be used as a great creativity tool, or at least a creativity enabler. And AI assistants can offer compelling conversational interfaces to access information. There's also, of course, some challenges. These models aren't perfect, as we all know. Educating the AI workforce is a huge job, and I would extend that actually to say educating everybody in the age of AI is going to be a huge job. There's big legal and ethical questions. It's going to have various effects on different industries, which also, of course, we will feel in the educational realm. And there's also some questionable uses of generative AI out there, and we need to safeguard our students from them and enable our students to be able to identify these and protect themselves from these. So back to programming, what do we need? And I'm going to break this down into a quick discussion on what do primary students need. And this is just me starting a list, because as you can see at the bottom, I'm asking you, what else? So I am arguing that primary students need to be aware enough of AI to be safe, to learn their way into second level, which includes a lot of other subjects, and sometimes including computer science, but not always. And it's not just about computer science. Programming is going to creep, or faster than creep, into all other subjects. It already is. So I think soon at primary level, we're going to have to start talking about not just teaching primary students how to program as we used to with Scratch, for instance, but how that programming is going to affect other subjects, similar to the old adage of English and mathematics, right? They affect all of the other subjects, and computing, programming, artificial intelligence is going to be, I think, similar. And that's going to trickle down into the primary education realm. What can primary students get? They can get safety. They can get a more enjoyable, more engaging introduction to programming. Think about maybe Scratch, but easier, more adaptable, more forgiving. A Scratch-like game, perhaps, that teaches programming, but knows the student and can push the student just enough at just the right time. And perhaps we are entering a world where programming is really just like reading and maths. It's something that you need to do all of your other subjects. So what do secondary students need? This is a little more complicated. We can start to talk about things like society and ethics. We're dealing with people that are coming into maturity. There are many different subjects involved. They have choices to make. They have technical aspects to keep safe in a more complex world that comes with approaching adulthood. They deal with more and more complex problems and hopefully solutions. And they need ways to deal with increasing responsibilities and pressures. So they need to be aware enough to be safe in more complex situations with more powerful tools. They need to be able to learn effectively across a broad range of subjects. They need to be equipped with knowledge, skills, competencies, dispositions to be safe and productive wherever they go next. And this is the key, right? We don't know where second level students are going to go. They may end up at university in any discipline, maybe CS, but statistically probably not. They may go straight into work in any field, or they may be going into some other area of society. Some school leavers might immediately become a carer for a relative. And what do they need to know about AI and programming, if anything? And what else am I missing in this list, I ask you? So what do we need to do? I'm going to go with a fun, at least fun to me, and historical-ish, yet currently in use curricular example. What I mean by that will become apparent pretty quickly here. The Irish Leaving Cert Computer Science specification is an optional computer science subject for the last 2 years. So basically ages 16 and 17, right before you leave school. It's new in 2018. It was actually developed around 2016, 2017. In my opinion, it's an excellent curriculum overall. There are some problems, like not all schools offer it, et cetera, but those are Irish problems, and we'll have Irish solutions for them. But the real problem is that there's 59 learning outcomes in this specification. And before I move to the next slide, do just keep in mind, this is a CS curriculum only, and it's only for those who choose to do it. So this is an excellent curriculum, I believe, but it has one learning outcome on AI. Explain when and what machine learning and AI algorithms might be used in certain contexts. So this isn't even an awareness learning outcome. This is jumping right into almost usage. which is a technical problem that I won't elaborate on. But my problem here is that in 2024, we have a curriculum that has 1 out of 59 learning outcomes on AI. And there's also 1 learning outcome on ethics. This is not good enough for 2024. Now, this was written 8 years ago, so Gen AI wasn't even on the horizon yet. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody or blaming anybody, but this is going to continue to accelerate, and we need to look at our curriculum, and we need to have adaptable curriculum. We can't have curricula that were written 8 years ago with 1 learning outcome on AI being used in 2024. So how to do it? I'm going to give you a few examples, and they're all extremely biased because I have my hands on all of them. Myself and a colleague, Keith Quill, who some of you may know, wrote a book for the curriculum that I just spoke about. It looked like nobody was going to write a book. We felt that it was a community service more than anything to write the book, plus it would be fun. So we wrote a book, and it very strictly adheres to that curriculum until chapter 13 and 14, where we give an entire chapter to that AI learning outcome, and chapter 14 gives an entire chapter to that ethics learning outcome. And of course, it's not just about those 2 learning outcomes. We go way beyond the curriculum. We couldn't write a book that didn't have what we felt was a full treatment of AI and a full treatment of ethics, even if the curriculum didn't have that. And we're happy. We've talked to teachers. Teachers have found time to use this material, even though it's not in the curriculum technically. We've talked to students who have happy to have it in front of them, and they read it when they're at home on their own time. And that's just something that I'm personally proud about, to be honest with you. And I think an example of what we need to do. We need resources, because resources can be more adaptable than curriculum in a way. And we need resources that keep up with what's going on. But all students need this information, right? Not just those that choose to study computer science at 2nd or 3rd level. We're talking about all students. So what do we do about that? Because largely what I've been talking about so far are computing students who are looking at computing careers. So this is a big question. How are we going to deal with the fact that all students are going to need some level of AI knowledge going into the real world? And here's an example of why that's true. This is, I think, 6 months old. Nearly 80% of British teenagers surveyed have used generative AI. I don't think anybody is shocked by this, but when you see it, that number is probably 98% today. So kids are using this without being educated on this. This is not in our curriculum. It's not in our resources. At 3rd level, it's a different story. We can be super adaptable. We can kind of teach whatever we want within our classrooms. That's all good. That's all grand. We can be adaptable or not. But at 2nd level and primary level, we're constrained by creakingly slow curricula. And we need to deal with that. So how do we do AI education at 2nd level? I argue that all 2nd level students need to be aware of what AI is and what AI isn't. They need to know where and how they'll come across AI and how to identify it. They need to know what are the safety, social, technical risks involved in AI use. They need to know what are the potential ethical risks in AI use. Then the CS students can worry about the technical details, all right? But all students are already using generative AI, and they're not being taught those 4 bullet points anywhere. What do we do about that from an educational perspective? Small divergence for those that do go on to study computer science at third or university level. There are already students learning from day one how to program with generative AI. From day one. There's a textbook about it. I'm sure a lot of you know about it, by Leo Porter and Dan Zingaro. Leo just last year ran his course using his book from day one, teaching students how to program using generative AI. So if a second level student is coming into that class and they're well versed in Gen AI use, they're already going to be ahead of the curve. And if a student has never used generative AI or doesn't know the ins and outs and the pitfalls of using generative AI, they're going to be at a disadvantage. So what can we do at second level? We can use Gen AI to lower barriers to programming for all students. And we can end up, hopefully, with a more diverse group of students who aren't afraid of programming and who are more engaged in programming. And I love this quote from Leo Porter here, the person I was just talking about. He said, LLMs lower the barrier for programming and may help us bring in a broader and more diverse group of students and professionals to the field. And that's someone who's been teaching with Gen AI for a year now, or a semester, and wrote a book on it. So I hope he's right. So how to do it? Here's a biased tool example. We may be able to develop new tools that leverage Gen AI and control Gen AI, tools that bridle the raw power and the dangers, including the educational pitfalls of generative AI, and allow Gen AI to be controlled and tuned for education. So as part of this team here, we've developed a new type of programming problem for education, which we call prompt problems. Some of this was just presented at SIGC last month. We developed a tool that can be used by students to practice prompt problems, which we call Promptly. And is this a good idea? Well, we're not sure, actually. We think it is. And more importantly, what else can be done in this arena? Because this is just one tool. It may work, it may not work. It's just a prototype. I'm going to show you a little demo right now. But, you know, should we be going down these roads of leveraging Gen AI, using generative AI, not just allowing students to access it or not access it? So prompt problems are designed to help students learn how to write effective prompts, but it's not about prompt engineering, and you'll see in a minute. But the point is, it's not a copy paste of the problem itself. You're not just taking the problem, putting it into Gen AI, getting an answer, and walking away with no understanding. Promptly is a tool that hosts a repository of prompt problems and supports the automated evaluation of the prompt-generated code. So the design ideally encourages students to specify and decompose the problem themselves, read the code that's generated, compare it with test cases to discern if it's failing, why it is, and then update their prompts accordingly. So here's a screenshot of what it looks like. At the top, there's a visual representation of a problem. So in this case, an animation, this was an animation that illustrates how this program should behave. And then the student writes in a prompt that says, this is the problem I need you to solve, do it. And then the LLM, or the Gen AI, provides a code response, which is then automatically assessed by an auto grader And then if it's incorrect, like I said, the student can readjust their prompt. So far in pilots, students have described engaging in metacognitive aspects of learning, such as planning their problem-solving approach and monitoring whether they understood what they were doing and when they were doing it. They reported increased awareness, exemplified by students who described how the tool might better support reflecting on their learning. And we think that prompt problems are a useful way to teach programming concepts and encourage metacognitive programming skills. Although so far this has only been tested on first-year students at university level, I think this tool would be entirely appropriate for late-stage second-level students, and a modified tool could probably be used for even younger students. But think about this, and I'm going to help you. What we're doing here with such a tool is not just leveraging Gen AI to do the same thing in a new way. We're fundamentally changing the way that instructors and students interact. So I ask you, is that a good thing? And here's my example. Here's a typical programming exercise. There's a problem. So in this case, it's turn the string "this is good" into "this is star, 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 star." So in other words, we're censoring out the word "good." So that's the problem. The instructor then provides a specification, explains the problem, and what the solution needs to look like. The student then implements a solution in code, and then an auto grader or a TA or the instructor, depending on circumstance, evaluates the solution. So we've been doing this for longer than I've been alive, I'd say. This is the way typical, not just programming exercises, but many exercises happen in education. But when we introduce things like prompt problems and tools like Promptly, this fundamentally changes. In a way, the student becomes the instructor, and the large language model, or the Gen AI, becomes the student. The student provides the specification from the problem. The large language model does the boring mechanical job of implementing the actual code solution. And then it's evaluated, and the student is fed back again. If it's success, it was success. If it wasn't success, the student tweaks the specification, and the process continues on. So we need to be mindful that when we're using new tools like this, we are, in a way, fundamentally altering traditional classroom dynamics. And is that a good thing or not? If you want to try Promptly, we have a research prototype available online at this URL. It is a research prototype. It has limited pre-populated problems and may be a touch buggy, but we are adding problems, maybe not weekly, but more than monthly. And we're experimenting with different natural languages. Right now, we put some Portuguese problems in, but I think you might need a special flag to do that. What else should we do? Here's a biased resource example. Students need to be informed about using these tools. So back to this paper, which I introduced earlier, this also includes a student guide on Gen AI use, including ethical implications, that we designed to be easily digestible. It's just one page, and it can be adapted for your students in any module or any class. And I would say it's applicable to second level. So this is what it looks like. It's available as the final appendix, in fact, the last page of the Robots Are Here paper, which is available on my website, or it's available at this URL here. And as it says here, feel free to adapt this guide for your students. So it goes into things like policies, examples of productive use, examples of inappropriate use, risks of Gen AI, the impact on others, and academic misconduct. So you could take your institutional policies or your classroom, context and use this as a template to tweak it and provide this to your students. And then all of your students are on the same page, no pun intended, in terms of how they should be using Gen AI in your class and what the boundaries are and what the risks are. Okay, wrapping up, let's not forget, even though the title has the word programming in it, this is not just about programming. In the real world, everyone is going to be using Gen AI. Even if they're not using Copilot to produce real code, they're programming. They're prompting a machine to get an output. That is programming in an abstract sense. You tell the machine what you want, and it gives you what you get. We're just used to programming at a character level, line by line, compiling, executing traditional programming. But using Gen AI is a form of programming in an abstract sense. And in the real world, everyone is going to be using it. Students of all disciplines, workers in all fields, all members of society. So how do we deal with that from an educational context? And to finish us off into the future, which is rapidly coming at us, how do we deal with this from an educational context in a context where we will also, thanks to generative AI, have things like personalized learning, automated mastery learning, virtual personal teaching assistants, and dare I say it, virtual personal teachers.
Huge thank you to Brett for a really thought-provoking session and a really serious set of questions that I think we need to think about.